No, we're not booing. We're not booing him. He's the officer that passed away here recently. So I know Pastor Tice spoke about Officer Abdel Nabi a few moments ago. No, we're not booing. We're not booing him. He's the officer that passed away here recently. So, and I asked if we had a moment of silence, and he said we had not. So I would like your indulgence for a moment of silence for Officer Austin. Thank you.
You ever see the signs? You're driving along in an electric car. They have a disease. You know, it's a disease. It's called, like, they get screwed up. They're driving, and they realize their battery's getting low. Very importantly for the people of the state, with the help of our Republican majorities in Congress, last year I signed the great, big, beautiful bill giving you the largest tax cuts in American history. You got no tax on tips that Dana was talking about. So if you're a waiter, a waitress, a bartender, a bellhop, a caddy, I love caddies.
All right, friends. Mockler here, and the news isn't good. At a Las Vegas rally, the president's warm-up act was overshadowed by an incident that upended expectations a moment political strategists dread. The full story is far more complicated than the viral clips suggest. He begins to honor a fallen police officer, a hero who had just been killed in the line of duty, a man who gave his life protecting others. This is supposed to be a solemn, unifying moment, the kind of tribute that transcends politics, that brings everyone together, regardless of their party affiliation. Respect for those who serve and protect. That's the script. That's the plan. And then, right at the moment when the governor speaks the officer's name, something completely unexpected happens. A portion of the crowd boos, audibly, loudly enough, that the governor has to stop what he's doing.
A valet, a hotel worker, taxi driver in Las Vegas or anywhere else, anywhere, you pay zero taxes on your tipped income. You know, I was having dinner with a group of people, including Ruffin, and we were talking, a lot of people, smart people, and a beautiful waitress came over. I'm not allowed to say that today, but I'll say it anyway. She was beautiful. What can I say? She was beautiful. In my place, steak, good steak, by the way. So we're eating, and this beautiful young lady walks over, and I said, "How you doing? Everything good?" "Sir, they're taxing me to death." I said, "Really? What are they taxing? They're taxing my tips." "Sir, they should have no tax on tips." I said, "Say it again. Say those words again." "Sir, they should have no tax on tips." I said, boy, that got me. I think that, Governor, I think that might have got me this massive victory that we had in this state.
Turn to the crowd and correct them in real time. No, we are not booing him. He is the officer that passed away here recently. And then the governor leads the crowd in a moment of silence at a political rally to honor a fallen hero. Let that sink in for a second. A Republican governor had to correct his own party's crowd during a memorial for a slain police officer at a Trump rally, before Trump even took the stage. This is absolutely stunning. Now, before we go any further, let me be absolutely clear about what we know and what we don't. Because this story has already been through the social media spin cycle in both directions.
And I went out, and we had those people. See all those people back there, the fake news? And in the middle of my meal, I gathered them together right outside the door of the steakhouse. And I said, "Are you ready to go?" Yes, sir, we're ready. The cameras. "We will have no tax on tips." And it became an overnight sensation. That's how it happened, actually. That's how she was my consultant. She did a better job than, you hire these people, you pay them millions of dollars, they don't come up with crap. Takes a waitress from Las Vegas to give us some good ideas.
A major security scare unfolded ahead of President Donald Trump's visit to California on Tuesday. An armed man carrying a pistol, prohibited ammunition, and later linked to a cache of weapons at his home, was arrested near Trump National Golf Course after allegedly photographing the property and monitoring security arrangements.
And there's a lot of noise that needs to be cleared away. Here's what is documented and verified. The governor was honoring the officer. When the name was mentioned, a portion of the crowd booed. The governor corrected them in real time. He led a moment of silence. That all happened. That's on video. That's documented. Here's what is not established. We don't know exactly what prompted the boo from the portion of the crowd that reacted that way. We don't know how many people booed. The reports say it was audible, but we don't have a precise count or percentage of attendees. And critically, the president was not yet on stage when this happened. He did not order the reaction.
While investigators have not confirmed any assassination plot, the incident has once again intensified concerns over the president's safety after multiple attempts on his life in recent years. Investigators identified the suspect as 38-year-old Janine John Taylor, who was detained at Trump National Golf Course in the city of Rancho Palos Verdes after plainclothes federal agents reported suspicious activity to local law enforcement. Deputies say they recovered a concealed pistol and a 16-round magazine loaded with hollow-point ammunition from the suspect, while another loaded firearm and additional prohibited ammunition were allegedly found inside his vehicle parked at the golf course. Authorities later raided the suspect's home, where investigators say they discovered an illegally modified AR-style rifle, another handgun, body armor, high-capacity magazines, thousands of rounds of ammunition, and notebooks containing what officials described as concerning statements. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and the U.S. Secret Service are now investigating the case, with officials warning that additional charges could still be filed as the probe continues.
He did not fight with the crowd. There is no reporting that suggests he had anything to do with the incident. This is a story about a moment that happened at a rally before the president spoke, involving the crowd and a Republican governor who had to step in and correct things. That's the actual documented story. And honestly, that story is remarkable enough on its own without anyone needing to add anything to it. Let's just talk about how strange this is from a pure political optics standpoint. Whoever was involved in planning this rally, whoever was responsible for the program, the sequence of events, the guest speakers, this was supposed to be a celebratory moment for the Republican Party, a show of strength, a show of unity, the president coming into Nevada to fire up the base.
Investigators have not stated that the suspect intended to target President Trump, and no assassination-related charges have been announced, but the timing of the arrest has triggered fresh scrutiny because it came just before Trump's Republican fundraising dinner at the golf course. The latest security scare comes after Trump survived multiple assassination attempts in recent years, ensuring that every suspicious incident near the president now attracts intense attention from federal authorities and raises renewed questions over the effectiveness of presidential security. Officials insist there is currently no credible threat to the wider community, but say the case highlights the importance of rapid coordination between local, state, and federal agencies to stop suspicious activity before it escalates into something far more dangerous. It was a moment Donald Trump never appeared to see coming. Lindsey Graham's sudden death at the age of 71 has not only sent shockwaves through Washington, it has reportedly forced the 80-year-old president to confront a reality he has rarely spoken about: the fragility of life and his own mortality.
The sitting Republican governor on stage introducing the proceedings. Law enforcement honored before the main event. That's the intended script. That's what a successful rally looks like. The tribute to a fallen officer is supposed to be an unambiguous moment of unity, the kind of thing that everyone in the room can rally around, regardless of their specific political priorities. A slain officer, respect, honor, silence. And then, one of the most uncomfortable things that could happen at that kind of moment happens. The crowd boos. A Republican governor has to stop and correct them in public on camera, and then the clip travels everywhere. That's the story of how a carefully planned political event produces a moment that nobody wanted, that cuts against everything the event was supposed to communicate, and that creates a political headache for the party before the main speaker even walks out on stage. That is wild, and it is worth understanding exactly how it happened and what it means going forward. So why does this matter? Why is this more than just a weird, awkward moment at a big political event? Because the Republican Party, and the president specifically, have built a significant portion of their political identity around law enforcement support. Back the blue, support the police, law and order. These are not peripheral themes for the Republican coalition. They are central defining commitments that the party returns to again and again in campaigns and in rhetoric and in policy debates. In a crowd at a rally, booing, or appearing to boo during a tribute to a slain police officer, to the point where the Republican governor has to stop and correct them publicly in real time. That is a moment that cuts directly against that law and order brand. Not because of anything the president did, not because of a policy failure or a political mistake at the top of the party, but because of a crowd reaction that happened in real time and got documented and went viral and now has to be accounted for. And the accounting of it is uncomfortable no matter which way you look at it. This is the kind of moment that political opponents will use for years to come. Every time a Republican talks about supporting law enforcement, this clip will resurface. Every time the party tries to make the case that they're the party of law and order, someone will bring up what happened at that rally. That's the long-term damage from a brief moment. The governor was honoring a hero who had recently been killed in the line of duty, and right at the mention of his name, a boo came from the crowd, audible, documented on video. The governor didn't ignore it or push through. He stopped. He addressed the crowd directly. No, we are not booing him. He is the officer that passed away here recently. And then he led a moment of silence. That is the sequence of events as documented. Clean, factual, on video. No interpretation needed. The boo happened. The correction happened. Both are real. Now here's where the story gets more complicated. We genuinely do not know why that portion of the crowd booed. And that uncertainty matters a lot, because different explanations lead to very different conclusions about what the moment actually means. One possibility is that some people in the crowd genuinely misheard or were confused about what was happening on stage. In a big loud rally environment with crowd noise and ambient sound and multiple things happening at once, it's possible that some people weren't tracking exactly what the governor was saying and reacted to something they misunderstood. Another possibility is that some portion of the crowd recognized the officer's name and reacted negatively for reasons having nothing to do with the tribute. Maybe they knew him, or knew something about his record, or maybe there was some other context entirely that hasn't been reported. Another possibility, one that's uncomfortable to discuss, but that has to be acknowledged, is that some portion of the crowd simply was not engaged in the tribute moment the way the governor intended them to be. And the boo was a kind of impatient or distracted reaction from people who were there for a political rally and not in the emotional headspace for a solemn moment of remembrance. We don't know which of these explanations is correct. We may never know definitively. Any coverage, including this video, that claims certainty about the motivation behind the boo is claiming more than the evidence actually supports. What we know is what happened. What we don't know is why. And that's actually important to sit with, because the temptation in a moment like this, especially in a politically charged environment where everyone is looking for evidence to confirm what they already believe, is to jump straight from the documented fact of the boo to a sweeping conclusion about what it means about the people at that rally, about the Republican Party, or about the relationship between the movement and law enforcement. Those conclusions may or may not be warranted. What is warranted is a more modest and more honest observation. A crowd at a major political rally for the Republican Party booed or appeared to boo during a tribute to a fallen police officer. A Republican governor had to stop and correct them publicly. That's a fact that happened, and it's uncomfortable, and it is worth taking seriously. But the specific meaning of that boo, the motivation behind it, that's where we have to be careful about filling in gaps with assumptions. Now let's talk about the governor's response. Because however complicated the crowd motivation question is, his handling of it was immediate and unambiguous. He did not ignore it. He did not power through awkwardly and hope nobody noticed. He did not try to redirect with a new topic. He stopped. He turned to the crowd. He said clearly and firmly, No, we are not booing him. He is the officer that passed away here recently. And then he organized a moment of silence. From a crowd management standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a pure human decency standpoint, that's exactly the right response. The governor is a former sheriff. He spent decades in law enforcement before becoming governor. This was not a situation where he was going to let a tribute to a slain officer get derailed by a crowd reaction and just keep moving. He stepped up. He did it fast. He did it clearly. And whatever you think about the politics of this event or the broader context of the rally, that specific moment of correction is not something that can or should be criticized. The governor did the right thing in real time. That deserves to be acknowledged clearly and without qualification. Now let's talk about the broader political context, because this incident landed in a specific political environment that shapes how it gets interpreted and why it spread the way it did. The Republican Party's relationship with law enforcement has been one of the defining political narratives of the past several years. Back the blue, support the police, law and order. These commitments are central to Republican political identity and have been used as a contrast point against the other party repeatedly in campaign cycles. The argument being made constantly in Republican political messaging is that the Republican Party stands with law enforcement, respects police officers, wants to fund and empower the people who put themselves in harm's way to protect the public. That's the brand. That's the message. And then you have a moment at a rally in front of cameras and thousands of people where a portion of the crowd boos during a tribute to a slain officer and a Republican governor has to correct them. That's not something that fits neatly into the brand. That's not a moment that reinforces the law and order messaging. That's a crack in the image. Small, maybe uncertain in its meaning, quickly corrected, but visible, documented, and on video. And in the age of clips that travel instantly across social media platforms, a visible, documented crack in your political brand image is not something that stays contained. It spreads, and it generates exactly the kind of conversation that the Republican Party would rather not be having about its rally crowds. And it's worth thinking about how this moment lands with actual law enforcement communities, because they have a stake in this that goes beyond the political optics. Police officers and their families and the broader law enforcement community that watches moments like this are not a monolithic group. Some are strongly aligned with the movement and the Republican Party. Some are not. Many are somewhere in the middle, trying to do a difficult job without getting pulled into partisan politics. But when a moment like this happens, when a fallen officer is being honored at a major political rally and a portion of the crowd boos, that lands differently with people who have colleagues who have died in the line of duty, officers who have attended funerals for partners killed on the job, families who have been through that specific grief. For those people, a boo at a tribute for a slain officer is not just a politically awkward moment. It is a personal affront. It communicates something about whether the respect being performed at these events is genuine, or whether it's a political prop that gets dropped the moment it becomes inconvenient, whether law enforcement communities broadly interpret it that way, whether this moment changes any votes or any institutional relationships between the party and police unions or police associations, that remains to be seen. But the clip exists. The moment happened. And the people in law enforcement who see it will process it through the lens of their own experience in ways that a political strategist sitting in an office cannot fully predict or control. There's also something worth saying about the specific setting here. This wasn't a small private event where a handful of people said something inappropriate and it went unrecorded. This was a major public rally, thousands of attendees, cameras rolling, a sitting Republican governor on stage. When things happen at this scale, they happen in public. They become part of the political record, and the speed with which this clip spread, the fact that we're talking about it now, tells you something about how sensitive the intersection of law enforcement and Republican political identity is right now. Any moment that seems to challenge the sincerity of Back the Blue, messaging is going to get amplified because it's a pressure point. And this clip hit that pressure point directly. And here's what makes the brand damage particularly complex. It's not just that the crowd at one rally reacted in an unexpected way. It's that the incident becomes a piece of evidence that political opponents and skeptics can point to when they want to challenge the sincerity of Republican law and order messaging. The next time a Republican politician invokes Back the Blue on the campaign trail, Someone is going to bring up what happened at that rally. The next time Republicans attack the other party on policing issues, someone is going to clip this moment into the conversation. That's how political moments work in the social media era. A clip from one event, even one that lasted maybe 30 seconds before the governor corrected it, becomes a recurring reference point that gets attached to every future invocation of the same theme. It doesn't matter that the governor handled it correctly. It doesn't matter that we don't know the exact motivation of the people who booed. What matters is that the clip exists, that it's viral, and that it creates a persistent visual counter-argument to one of the Republican Party's most consistent and politically important messaging lines. That's the specific political damage from this specific moment. And the party's best response, the only response that actually addresses the image problem, rather than just hoping it goes away, is to take the moment seriously, honor the officer's memory explicitly and publicly, and make clear that what happened in that crowd does not reflect what the party stands for. The governor already started doing that. Whether the broader party follows through is a different question. Let's bring it home now. There are several things you need to take away from this story, because even though it was a brief moment, it says something worth paying attention to. The documented facts here are sufficient to make this story significant without anyone needing to add speculation on top of them. A crowd at a rally booed during a tribute to a slain police officer. A Republican governor corrected them in real time. Both things happened. Both are documented. Both are on video. That's the story. And that story doesn't need embellishment. It doesn't need a claim that the president was involved, he wasn't on stage. It doesn't need a definitive explanation for why the boo happened. That explanation isn't established. It doesn't need anyone claiming this proves something sweeping about the Republican Party or its voters as a whole. That would be overclaiming. The documented facts by themselves are remarkable and worth discussing. A crowd at a political rally booed during a memorial for a fallen officer. A governor stopped everything and corrected them. That's a story. You don't need to add anything to it to make it compelling. And adding things that aren't verified, things that aren't established, actually weakens the story by giving people a reason to dismiss the real, documented thing that happened. The uncertainty about motivation matters, and it should be treated honestly. This is actually the most intellectually important part of the story. We don't know definitively why a portion of that crowd booed when the officer's name was mentioned. The possibilities range from simple confusion in a noisy rally environment to distraction to something more troubling. And the honest response to that uncertainty is to acknowledge it rather than to pick the most inflammatory possible explanation and run with it. Because here's what happens when you pick the most inflammatory explanation without establishing it as fact. You hand the people who want to defend the crowd an easy counter-argument. They can say, you don't know why they booed. You're assuming the worst. You're using one moment to smear thousands of people who were there to support their candidate. And they're not entirely wrong, because you did assume the worst without evidence. The stronger argument is the more careful one. Something happened. It was documented. A Republican governor thought it was bad enough that he had to correct it publicly in real time. Whatever the motivation was, that response was warranted. And the party has to grapple with the image problem that the moment created, regardless of what the motivation actually was. The governor's handling of this was exactly right and deserves to be said clearly. This is a moment where someone in leadership did the obvious and decent thing, and it should be acknowledged. He corrected the crowd immediately, didn't hesitate, didn't calculate politically, just stopped and said, no, we are not doing this. He is the officer that passed away here recently. And then led a moment of silence. In a politically charged environment where everything gets weaponized and everyone is constantly calculating how every micro moment plays, that's a straightforward human decency response. And it worked. He redirected the energy of the moment. He honored the officer. He made clear that this was not what the crowd was supposed to be doing. That's leadership. It doesn't resolve the underlying weirdness of the moment or explain why the boo happened in the first place, but it is the correct response to what happened. And he deserves credit for doing it without hesitation. This moment matters most as a test of political brand authenticity. The The Republican Party has made back the blue: support for law enforcement, respect for police officers, honoring people who serve and protect. A central part of its public identity. That commitment is supposed to be non-negotiable. It's supposed to be above politics. It's supposed to be something that happens automatically and sincerely in every context, including at rallies and political events. And then a moment like this happens, where a crowd appears to boo during a tribute to a fallen officer. And it creates an authenticity question, not a question about Republican policy positions on policing, not a question about what the president believes or what the governor believes, a question about whether the crowd itself, the people showing up at these events, carries that commitment as genuinely and automatically as the political messaging claims. That's a delicate and uncomfortable question for any party to face. And the fact that a Republican governor had to correct it publicly means the question got raised at a very visible moment in a very public way. The party's response to that question, how it talks about this moment, whether it addresses the underlying dynamics or just moves past it, that response will say something about whether the law and order brand is a sincere commitment or a political performance. And people are watching. And this specific incident, brief as it was, corrected as quickly as it was, is going to stay in the conversation for exactly that reason, because it's a data point. It's a documented moment where the behavior of a portion of the crowd at a major Republican political event did not match the stated values of the party those people were there to celebrate. That gap between the stated value and the demonstrated behavior is what political authenticity debates are built on. And it's going to be referenced. It's going to get pulled out every time someone wants to make an argument about the sincerity of Republican law enforcement support. The party can't unring that bell. What it can do is respond to it clearly, specifically, and sincerely. Honoring the officer, acknowledging what happened, and making the case with action rather than just messaging that the commitment to law enforcement is real and not conditional. That's the only response that actually addresses the underlying question the moment raised. And so far, beyond the governor's real-time correction, that response is still pending. At a major rally, a crowd booed during the tribute to a fallen officer. A Republican governor stopped everything to correct them and led a moment of silence. The president was not on stage. The motivation for the boo is genuinely uncertain, and responsible coverage has to acknowledge that uncertainty clearly. What is certain is that it happened, that the governor responded the right way. Quickly, clearly, without calculation, that it went viral, and that it created an uncomfortable and ongoing conversation for a party that has made support for law enforcement one of its most central and consistent public commitments. The story doesn't need to be made bigger than it is to matter. It doesn't need exaggeration. It doesn't need invented detail or unverified explanation. The documented facts, a boo, a correction, a moment of silence, a clip that won't stop traveling, are enough. They're more than enough. They raise real questions that deserve real, honest answers. And the officer who died in the line of duty deserves to be remembered. That part at least is not complicated at all. A police officer died in the line of duty. His name deserves to be spoken with respect at a rally or anywhere else. And the crowd that was corrected by their own governor should reflect on that. A rally moment where a portion of a crowd reportedly booed a fallen officer will now be used by political opponents to question Republican law enforcement messaging. How the party responds will reveal whether their commitment to police is genuine or just a convenient talking point. The challenge is to honor the fallen officer and make clear the crowd's behavior doesn't define the party's values.